and welcome to And You Know This. I'm your host, Katura Kendrick, and here is what I believe. I believe not only does your life know exactly what it wants, it has always known what you need. The tricky thing is, you have to be really good at silencing all the noise around you so you can actually hear your life and give it what it wants. My guest today is a living, breathing proof of this. I am privileged to have with me Miss Marianne Mesfin. How are you doing, Marianne?
I'm very good. Thank you, Couture. And that was such a lovely introduction too.
I'm glad you liked it. It really fits you
Mhm.
in all of
Thank
my
you.
as well. So let's get started by having you introduce yourself. Marianne, tell us who you are and most importantly, what brings you joy.
Okay, so like you said, I'm Marianne. I'm an Ethiopian, born in Uganda, raised in Rwanda, currently about to move to Canada. Anyways, I've kind of lived all over, and I think that's shaped the person that I am for sure. I identify strongly as a feminist, and thankfully, that also happens to be the kind of work that I do. I work in the feminist nonprofit space, and that brings me a lot of fulfillment. And in terms of what brings me joy, I would say honestly, in the past year as well, like my strong female friendships and also just my strong connection to family. I think those have been quite the anchor, given how difficult and also just like all over the place the past year or couple of years has been. So that's definitely something that brings me joy and like is my center.
Excellent. I love that. I'm so glad that you're here. I can't wait to dig in deeper because some of this we've talked about several times in the years we've known each other. But let's start
Right.
when we were chatting about your coming on for this specific reason, this specific topic. You talked about coming across soft life social
Hmm.
media. I think it may have been TikTok specifically. Now, I don't want to just paint a broad brush because some of the
Hmm.
soft life content is very specific, whereas the other sort of brand of soft life content is a whole different thing. So when you came across the soft life content, mostly largely cis women having a
Hmm.
very specific message and imagery, describe to us what kind of soft life content you were coming across and what was your initial reaction to it?
Yeah. So, really good question. Very interesting topic. Because initially for me, the soft like content that I was coming across was more like about relaxation, about like pampering yourself, about, some might equate it to like self care or something, just like, taking care of yourself and trying to find moments of like peace in the you know rough and tumble that is daily life, and that is capitalism really, because I feel like that's part of like that's something that's shaping all our experiences. And so yeah, initially it was very I found it very appealing because I was like, I do want the soft life, I do want to be um comfortable, I don't want to be stressing every single day behind a screen, or it's nice to have an income because it allows you to live your life, but also because of how capitalism is structured, we tend to be working more than enjoying the fruits of our labor. And so the soft life content was very appealing. I was like, okay, yes, this is nice. Like, how do I get this? Because it's also very aspirational. I feel like it was very like, this is something that you can get to. This is something that you can attain if you follow these steps, or if you marry well, or if you suddenly get this job that I don't know pays you how much, but it's very low effort. Like there's all these like ifs that a lot of times you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get to that. So I'm just going to try to do soft life in whatever capacity I can in whatever exists for me right now. So that's kind of how I initially like came across it.
And what's interesting is you sort of mentioned that it started off as very much pure and wholesome, which is good messaging. Like
Mhm.
capitalism has us all in a chokehold and has its foot on everybody's neck who is not part of that very tiny percentage who have access to the real wealth, right? So
Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
take care of yourself, rest, go out with your good girlfriends, go on your little vacations to the neighboring, go to Tanzania for the weekend. Yes, do all of that. Then it
Mhm.
kind of morphed into what you sort of hit on towards the end, not only aspirational, but maybe if I marry well,
Mhm.
I can have this soft life, which sort of became adjacent to what I started noticing as the traditional wife or trad wife content. Now, I will say,
Mhm,
in my perspective as an American, especially American who is Black and from the African diaspora, I don't see too many women who look like me doing the trad life content. But I
mhm,
do see a number of women who look like me buying into the soft life being almost adjacent to traditional wife. Um,
mhm,
as you started to see this, take care of yourself. Capitalism is trying to choke us all out, so do your best not to always be struggling and working. Then going to actually, what you need is a good man. If you can't get that good job, what you need is a good man to give you this soft life.
mhm,
You saw that morphing, especially since you said in your intro you identify as a feminist so much so you have chosen to work in that field.
mhm.
How did your perspective or how did your outlook shift a little bit as you saw it turning into that?
It was kind of I was noticing it, but also I think I needed to hear the critique to get that like full picture of even just connecting those like those different aspects of like or the different trends basically. Because initially you can separate it in your mind as like, yeah, there's soft life, there's this, and then there's the trad wife stuff. But it's all kind of, connected. And I've come to when came to notice that that was kind of the shock of, oh wait, what am I actually really buying into? Because for me also, I think you were talking about from your context, it's not something that you really saw in terms of, women that look like you ascribing or like being able to access this trad wife kind of life. I didn't really see that either growing up, at least not in the very like TikTok or traditional sense that we're seeing it right now, where the woman is like fully responsible for anything that has to do with labor in the home, whether it be cooking, cleaning, child rearing, and everything. I always, from like personally my upbringing, I saw that as like a very split task, like, two parents raising children and taking care of the home together. Of course, but like we live in a patriarchal society. So there were still certain things that are more ascribed to women, like child rearing is seen to be like women's domain primarily. And then men can kind of tap into it and tap out when they want to, and they'll be congratulated either way.
I love the way you
But
describe that. They can tap in and tap out and still be congratulated. Yeah.
yeah, they like active parenting for them is not the same. Like they are held to a different standard than women. Women are held to a much higher standard. And so, I've seeing men kind of look like they're babysitting their children, look like they're kind of spending time with their children. That's the kind of like those are the kind of roles that I saw at least in marriage. So it wasn't so much like strictly, oh, everything is in the home, and it wasn't super glamorized either. And I think also the side of the world that I live on, or that I live in or grew up in, there's access to like more like paid labor in the home. So whether that's like someone that cooks and cleans, someone that also takes care of children. So again, even if the wife is a stay at home mom, she's not carrying all the labor in the home by herself. Again, caveat: there's a certain social status or social class that allows you or that affords you this lifestyle. So of course, there's a lot of people that do it with a lot less support. But the women that I tended to see had a lot more support. And I think even now, when I think about Tradwife or like the closest to Tradwife in this context, still involves having at least a childcare in the home, someone that does like that cooks the food and cleans it. So your role is like present as good mother, involved mother, good wife, look good, treat yourself once in a while, but just your role is that of wife, and you don't have to go out and earn an income because the income is being earned by your spouse. Again, it's not so many people that can afford that lifestyle with just one income. So it still is like a bit unattainable in that sense. But I think the social media sense or the TikTok ones that I'm seeing are very, North American centric, very white. And so, and again, that have access to this probably generational wealth that many of us have never seen. And so, one, not only are they like, um, you know, celebrating and glamorizing this life, they're also not giving you any kind of like context or any kind of like behind the scenes because realistically, are you filming content this regularly with children running around the house? Are you actually like baking bread from scratch daily and like making cereal from scratch. Like it's wonderful, but is it real? Most times it's not. So like how can that be first of all, how can that be attained by many? And how can that be a soft life? It involves a lot of labor. So I was like, it's not adding up. Like just because you're not out there working doesn't mean you're not in the home working. So again, capitalism favors this like nuclear family structure because it allows the structure to, keep replicating itself. That's the reason why women were staying at home and men were going out to work in that very traditional capitalist sense, because you need someone to maintain the home. Otherwise, you can't really sustain yourself. So yeah, I started to see kind of the lies or like the facade, and I was a bit taken aback, and I was like, okay, it's not something that I can aspire to. It's not realistic for me on many levels. And also like, I have this critique of marriage where I'm like, it's most marriages end up kind of conforming, I think, to traditional roles. Some, for some it works out, for some it doesn't. But like,
I
I
think it's
have,
very
strong
difficult.
feelings.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
very difficult. I hate to interrupt you, but I think it's very
No
difficult.
worries.
It's
Mhm.
very difficult not to conform to traditional roles because a large population of the world, not just on my continent, not just on your continent, but a large demographic of the world isn't interested in stripping down the
Mhm.
patriarchy and rebuilding. So
Yeah.
even if you and your, especially with what we're speaking about heterosexual marriages, even if you
Right.
and your husband are committed to egalitarian marriage, the teacher is not, so she will call you when when
Hmm.
when your kid is not acting right.
Yeah.
Your job is not, so they will not expect your husband to take off when the child is sick, but you will. Like so, I
Hmm.
think you're very dead on with that across the world, not just in Africa, not just in North America, not just in Europe, across the world. I think you're gonna fight to reorder this institution, or you're gonna raise these kids and get through the day.
Exactly. Because everything can't be a battle, really. Like you don't have the time for the daily battles. But yeah, I definitely hear you.
Yeah, and I appreciate you said a lot in there that I want to dig into a little bit more.
Mhm.
One, that when the soft life went from what you were noticing, from just take care of yourself and stop, like basically letting capitalism beat you to the ground, to a more very much white centric, a very small population of the world able, even within white culture, a very small population within the world of white people who can actually afford this.
Mhm.
Let's now
Mhm.
go to traditional white. We made a mistake when we decided to like give women more freedom or whatever. Um, but it's aspirational, and many people will never be able to attain that because of the
Mhm.
way capitalism is set up. And you
Right.
also had a very interesting perspective on critiquing marriage in a nuclear family, that it sort of furthers and supports capitalism because of that structure. So I'm curious from you as a young East African woman, because you're like right on the cusp of 30, right, Marianne?
I am right on the cusp of 30. Mhm.
Congratulations. It's a great decade you're going into. And you're going
Thank
into
you.
you're going into a
Thank you.
gorgeous and intelligent and traveled and global. So you got this, girlie.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm curious if you can give me some insight into why you think, because you just presented to me, which I think is very obvious realities if you're living in the real world in the 21st century, of why this soft life slash traditional wife jargon doesn't work for many people. Why do you
Mhm.
think people, maybe women in your age group, maybe not completely bought into it? Like they know this woman is making content, like this is her job making content, but they still kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna be more aware of the trad life and stuff. Like, why is it easy for them to buy into this could be the right role for me? Maybe we did make a mistake when we started becoming more women don't need men, women don't need marriage. Why do you think women
Mhm.
in your age group, maybe not completely, but in the back of their mind is like, that'd be nice.
I mean, yeah, I feel like for many reasons, and I think that's also why I, extend a lot of grace when people are aspiring to it or like choosing that for themselves. Because one, it's really nice to be able to like have the freedom that comes with having your own income and being able to do things for yourself. But it's not nice to work. And especially as women, we still live in a patriarchal society, and most women are still paid less than men for the same amount of work. And you also end up getting, it's harder to, be in like certain sectors as a woman than it is in others. You tend to be in more like, I don't know, like administrative type of jobs or jobs where you're still taking on that kind of like care role. Whatever position you're in, you're expected to sort of be the, holding the office party or holding the retreat, holding the whatever, like those roles are still ascribed to women. But on top of that, you're not making a lot of money even in that role, and you're working very hard. You're not seeing that turn into a lot of money, and you still have bills to pay. So, on that like very material sense, it would be nice to have someone that can provide for you, that has a really good steady income, and all you really have to do, or again, I don't say this lightly, but like what you really have to do is maintain the home and maintain your beauty and maintain yourself, and just like be and give that to the person who's in exchange for their income and the comforts that the life that they can provide for you. So on that very basic level, like I get it, where you'd rather be taken care of to an extent, even though you're taking care of another person as well. But being taken care of is nice. So I can see the appeal from that sense. I can also see the appeal because of societal pressure. As much as we're moving towards, women are, getting married a bit later and or not at all, or are kind of like sort of determining their own path even when they get married, not necessarily like, joining their incomes or, changing their names or whatever it may be. Like they're still adapting marriage to their own needs. I think for the most part, society still pressures you to get married. Like after a certain age, there's this like, your expiration date is approaching as a woman. How long will you be young and beautiful? And when you're no longer young and beautiful, who will want you?
You did not say your expiration date.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's matter because that's exactly how it's framed, and it was framed that way when I was your age and younger. Like I would always be like, so if I turn 30, will without a partner, because I didn't really want one anyway. Literally, will I just fall off into this black hole and die? Is that what's going? Because that's the way it's framed. That is such a perfect framing for your expiration date.
That is exactly how it's framed.
So you mentioned that there still is societal pressure that, of course, you have grace for women who, especially women who are like, I'm going to go towards this soft life and trad life the best way I can because it's better for me. One, because
Mhm.
the reality is working, even if you enjoy it, is not necessarily fun. You don't get paid much for it as a woman, comparatively
Mhm.
to your male counterparts. And the reality is, I think a lot of people believe that the pressure on women, um, globally, especially, has been lessened to marry. That we free now, and it's an option, and women are not as bound by the societal expectation. And you believe that we have not made as much progress in lessening the pressure of of women to get partnered legally before
Mhm.
their expiration date. Could you expound a little bit
Yeah.
more on that?
Yeah, because I also feel like the pressure lessening is very contextual because so from where I'm sitting, as an East African woman on this side of the world, for the most part, women are still getting married. Women my age are still seeking marriage as like, something that they want to take part in. But on top of that, the people around you, the women in your life, the adults in your life, the friends around you, everyone is eventually like assuming that you will get to a point that you get married. And if you don't, it's still a bit of an anomaly. It's a bit of a why. There's a question mark there. There's a bit of judgment, I would say. There's even just a bit of like beyond judgment, there's also it's almost like, what's wrong with her? Like, why would she not want to take part in this like very natural part of life? Because then there's also you get married and then you have children and then you're settled. Like that's such a milestone that you need to reach that if you don't reach it, there must be a reason. Like, is it your sexuality? Is it that you're not, heterosexual and therefore maybe you're not allowed to marry where you are? Is it that you're unable to have children? And just all these invasive questions that come up as a result of it. But I think those questions are pressure because it's basically telling you that this is something that you should aspire to. This is something that you should attain, no matter what your accolades, no matter how much you've accomplished, whether it be like career, academia or just like personal experiences, you know, it's like, okay, well, there comes a point when you need to stop. You need to stop. You need to get married. And you can now, I think now the way that it's been repackaged is you can do these things with your spouse, which is true. Yes, you can travel the world with your spouse. You can still work. You can still do this. You can still do that. But, you know, obviously, inevitably, there's going to be compromise and you're going to have to make that compromise because you're an adult. And I think that, yeah, that pressure hasn't gone anywhere. I don't think it's necessarily lessened. Maybe it's just like changed form and it's not so like accusatory. It's more just like questioning and a bit of like curiosity. And even some of the aunties that take on the role of matchmaker and are like, I know somebody for you. You know, are you sure? Are you why would you not want to, you know? So yeah, I would say the pressure is not gone for where I'm based. It's more just, you know, dispersed and it's like coming out in different ways. And again, you know, I can understand why young women then decide to get married because that pressure definitely gets to you.
Excellent. And I think one of the ways it has morphed into something different that on the surface does not look like it's judgmental is the soft life, adjacent trad life content, even if it's not explicitly like these white, skinny, big boob, blonde women, you know, baking bread and, you know, saying they just look forward to waking up at the crack of dawn and send their kids off to school. Nothing brings them joy. Even if it's not that,
Mm,
it's also in conversations, largely on social media, but I have seen those conversations play out, especially around women in their 20s who feel this pressure here, even in the lying progressive West, right? Uh,
mhm,
it is this subtle, well, you know, you can have this, but really, working kind of sucks. You're never going to get paid the same amount of money. You have, you know, all of the props of being an acceptable chosen woman. And that comes in a lot of the content that's created, even if it's not overtly on, you know, a Tradwife or
mhm,
Soft Life TikTok, right? And I'm thinking about all of the 23, 24-year-olds who they got their first job and they're realizing this what the adults been doing all this damn time. This
mhm.
is and they generally do. They love romantic love. It's not an awful thing. They generally do want
Not
to
at all.
take on family because they feel that is going to be a good, comfortable construct for them. And you know, there's worse things to do than raise some children and be married to someone who treats you well, right? So they're
Mhm,
thinking that anyway, and they're watching this content where literally they're being told you are kind of wasting your time avoiding the natural progression of life, which is being someone's wife and someone's mother. They're watching this content. They're having conversations with their girlfriends about the reality of wanting a real relationship that is meaningful, that may lead to marriage, because that's something that's important to them. And it's easy for them to sort of overlay all of the things we talked about earlier when you really look at the realities of life for the vast majority of people. White,
mhm,
black, or different. The vast majority of people, that romanticized version of nuclear family is not aspirational because you won't be able to get it. Capitalism has made it a point for you not to get it. But you
mhm,
have these 20 something, early 20 somethings looking at this and not being able to so differentiate it. What would you say to those young women who want this? Because there's nothing wrong with wanting a nuclear family and wanting to have some version of the soft life, and even if you want to be a traditional wife, right? What would
mhm.
you say to them as they are consuming this content, having these conversations with their girlfriends who kind of want the same thing, in a sort of seeing this broad brush of what life has to offer them? What would you say to those young women?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say, like, again, as a person who is on the cusp of 30, but is still, you know, figuring out life and still haven't decided a lot of things. I'm still like, you know, trying to get to know myself and what I want. I would say there's the way that it's being presented to you, you should critique a little bit more. I think if if we're still existing in a patriarchal system and you're getting this messaging that's saying you should aspire to more traditional roles, to like, you know, the trad wife, you know, the woman that just like aspires to being a wife only and like, you know, everything else doesn't really matter as much. I think consider where that messaging is coming from and why it's so pervasive, because we still exist in a patriarchal society that will push that agenda because again, it sustains the system as it is. So it's not first of all, it's not new. It's not a novel idea. It's been around for a while. It's just being repackaged to us a little bit. But also consider your own like freedom and the things that you like to do, and that being tied to someone else, whether it be like because they're the ones providing you with, financial stability or just providing you an income, whether it's because you now have someone else in your life that you have to compromise for, or you now have children that you have to compromise for. Think about your own freedom and what this kind of lifestyle doesn't allow you to experience. Because I think what we see a lot of is what it could allow you to experience, which is, this comfort, nice clothes, nice things, nice trips, nice vacations and everything. But all that is tied to someone else. And so that someone else can also take it away. But if it's you that's offering that to yourself, then at least, again, if life can take it away, yes, but at least you have a bit more control of it. So I feel like just thinking about like freedom in that expansive sense, because to me, I think it's always been freedom, like, financial independence and all that has always been tied to like personal freedom and just freedom to like grow and be yourself. And when you're young and in your early 20s, I feel like everything is telling you, everyone is telling you something. Everyone is telling you how to be, what to do, where you should be heading. But you should really like, that should be the time that you're allowed to explore. And certain options like getting married or being, in a, relationship with someone that's then also controlling your finances don't really allow you to explore that much in most cases. Maybe in some cases they do, but in most cases they don't. So like consider your freedom and whether that's something you're actually like willing to give up or compromise to a certain extent. But I also think one of the things that we tend to be, or the messaging that we also get as young women is that if you don't, like, it's great that you're doing your education, further education. It's great that you're, working and getting your money and living by yourself or living with a friend or whatever. It's great that you're doing all that. But then what happens when everyone is married, everyone has children, everyone has their own lives, and you have just yourself? You're going to be lonely. And there's this like specter of loneliness that's hanging over us constantly that even I'm not like fully able to shake. I always have to like wrestle with it in my mind. But part of it is, one, I don't think marriage is necessarily the cure to loneliness. I think partnership, like meaningful partnership, is, that's what you need. And meaningful partnership can also exist outside of a romantic relationship. Not that we shouldn't aspire to a romantic relationship. I still want a romantic relationship, but like building friendships, building, family relationships, or like nurturing other relationships outside of that one relationship is ultimately what's going to like do away with this loneliness. Because again, one person can't be the only person that's going to be that's your end all be all. And actually this, and even like just thinking about marriage and stuff, I always think about what you said a couple of years ago when we met and we were talking about your book, about how much time you spend worrying about whether you do want to get married or whether you do want this life for yourself without actually just living the life that you're in right now. Is, I think that's also kind of like really shifts my perspective. So just thinking about all those and thinking about, how relationships, friendships, all that can add to your life beyond just thinking about like this one thing that's marriage and how it's sold to you. So I feel like that's what I would say, with always the caveat that I'm also a young person figuring it out. So I don't know. Some things I'm saying challenge me. I could be wrong.
I love that, the perfect ending. Like, clearly critique it. There are some things you're not being told. There's more than just centering this one out of many interpersonal relationships as one relationship. And also, child, listen, I don't know. I could be wrong. Just do you.
But yeah, do you? But think about it. Like, nothing is ever so simple as well.
Exactly. I want to thank you, Marianne. Y'all, Marianne literally is in the middle of leaving one continent for another. In two
And
days after this interview, she will be on a plane to go to Canada. So I appreciate you taking time out of the beautiful and gorgeous Kigali day to come and talk to us. Before you leave, tell us where we can find you, what else you have going on. Because the reason why Marianne is on this show is because she and her other East African girlies have many projects they're working on to spread this same message of freedom for women, being intentional in how you live. So tell us where to find you. Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about any other thing you're working on that we can access.
Okay. So Right now, I think the main thing I would say is the podcast is a thing to follow. So I have a podcast with, well, really a friend of mine started it. Her name is Angel. She started the podcast, and now with her and one other friend, Elodie, we do the podcast together. It's called Kila Kitu Podcast. So that's well, maybe you can like insert it somewhere, but Kila Kitu
I
is
will.
also it's Swahili for everything. So it's kind of it's our catch-all. It's our podcast where we talk about any and everything. But a lot of times we're talking about being young women navigating our lives in Kigali, but also just, in general. So we talk about things that are similar to what I've talked about today. And also it's just a fun space for us to hang out and be ourselves. So I would encourage you to go listen to the Kila Kitu podcast. We have an Instagram page, Twitter, and we're also on, Spotify and all the other places, Apple Podcasts that you listen to your podcasts. Everywhere, Kila Kitu Podcast. Kila Kitu is two separate words. And I'm on Instagram as well. I will just say one of my private my public account is Natural Feminista blog at the end. And that's the public account. That's also where I post some of the Kila Kitu content. So you can follow me on there. But yes, come listen to the podcast and join us. And yeah, this is really fun too.
Yes, I'm glad I had a great time. I always love talking to you, Marianne, and I will drop all those
Thank
little
you.
links, and also make it easy for them to access in comments and just on the content as general. Thank you so much. Please have a safe flight to Canada. Enjoy
Thank
Canada.
you.
Because where in Canada it's Toronto, right?
I'm moving to Toronto. Yes.
Enjoy it. Hope you have
Exciting.
a nice big coat. All right.
I will get that. I'll get my coats. I'll get a coat and some scarves and some thermal wear
Yes, yes.
for leaving
But
this lovely, lovely weather.
yes, but I'm like, that's truly a big compromise is leaving that beautiful temperate weather of Kigali, Rwanda for Toronto, Canada. Both are very nice countries.
Listen,
No shade to either country, but
no, no shade, but this one has quite the perks I'm going to be missing a lot of.
yeah. So have a good
Yeah.
flight and thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciate this.